My husband started coming home late and hiding his phone, then one message appeared on his screen, "Did you tell her yet?" In that moment, I thought my marriage was over. My name is Mona, and I am 38 years old. I have been married for 10 years to my husband, Russel, who is 42 years old. Our life together has always been simple and peaceful. We live in a small apartment, not very big or luxurious, but it has always felt warm and comfortable to us. Russel works at a logistics company near the airport. His job is often stressful and demanding because he has to deal with shipments, schedules, and many responsibilities. Even though the work makes him tired, he always tells me that he is doing it for our future and for the life we are building together. During the day, I work at a medical office where I help patients and assist the staff with different tasks. Our days are usually very busy, but in the past we always felt happy and satisfied with the life we shared. Russel has always been the kind of husband who talks openly with me. He usually tells me everything about his day. When something good happens at work, he shares the news with excitement. If he has a difficult day or faces a problem, he also tells me about it. From the beginning of our marriage, we had one simple rule between us: there should be no secrets. We believed that honesty was the most important part of a strong relationship. For many years, I trusted that rule completely. I believed that we always shared everything with each other. However, during the last 3 weeks, something in our life has slowly begun to change. At first, the changes were very small, almost too small to notice. Russel started coming home later than usual. Sometimes he looked tired and distracted, as if his thoughts were somewhere far away. It felt like he was present in the room, but his mind was somewhere else. One evening while we were having dinner together, his phone suddenly rang. Russel looked at the screen for a moment, and then he stood up and walked into another room to answer the call. This surprised me because he had never done that before. Normally he answered calls right in front of me. When he came back to the table, I gently asked him who had called. He quickly said that it was just someone from work. His answer sounded simple, but there was something unusual in his voice. It felt slightly nervous, almost as if he was hiding something. I tried not to think too much about it. I told myself that maybe I was just imagining things or worrying without a reason. Still, I could not ignore the heavy feeling in my heart. A few days later, I decided to visit my friend Ellen, who lives in the apartment next to ours. Ellen is older than me and has lived in this building for many years. She is kind, wise, and always ready to listen when someone needs to talk. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, she smiled and said warmly, "Mona, come in." We sat together at the small table in her kitchen. After looking at me for a moment, Ellen asked gently, "Mona, what's wrong?" I tried to smile and act normal. I told her that everything was fine and that nothing was wrong. But Ellen raised her eyebrow and looked at me carefully. Then she said, "You forget something. I have known you for 3 years." At that moment I realized I could not hide my feelings from her. Slowly, I began telling her everything. I explained how Russel had been coming home late, how he sometimes avoided my questions, and how he had started taking phone calls in another room. Ellen listened quietly and did not interrupt me while I spoke. When I finally finished talking, Ellen remained silent for a moment. Then she said something that stayed in my mind for a long time. She said, "Sometimes people carry their problems alone, not because they want to hurt us, but because they believe they are protecting us." Her words made me think deeply. Maybe she was right. Maybe Russell was dealing with something difficult, and maybe he believed he was protecting me by keeping it to himself. Still, I could not stop wondering what was really happening in our life. Maybe Russell was dealing with something difficult in his life. I tried to believe that possibility and convince myself that everything would eventually return to normal. However, that same night something happened that made my worries even stronger. Russell came home much later than usual. The moment he walked into the apartment, I noticed that something about him was different. He did not look tired from work like he usually did, and he did not seem distracted either. Instead, he looked nervous. His movements were slow and uneasy, and he avoided looking directly at me. He quietly placed his keys on the table and stood there for a moment as if he was thinking about something important. After a short silence, he suddenly said, "Mona, have you ever thought about moving?" His question surprised me immediately. I looked at him with confusion and asked, "Moving? Moving where?" Russell hesitated for a moment and then replied, "I don't know, maybe another city. Maybe somewhere closer to the coast." His answer felt strange and unexpected. During our 10 years of marriage, we had never seriously talked about moving away. Our jobs were here, our friends were here, and the life we had built together was here in this city. Everything familiar to us was here. So hearing him suddenly talk about leaving made no sense to me. I looked at him carefully and asked, "Russell, what is going on?" Instead of answering my question, Russell simply shook his head. He did not explain anything. His silence made the situation feel even more uncomfortable. It was as if there was a wall between us that had never been there before. Later that night, Russell went to take a shower. While he was in the bathroom, his phone was lying on the kitchen counter. Suddenly it vibrated, and the screen lit up with a message notification. I had not planned to check his phone at all. I truly did not want to invade his privacy. But when the screen lit up, my eyes naturally looked at it for a moment. The message preview only showed a few short words. The message said, "Did you tell her yet?" The moment I read those words, my heart seemed to stop. My mind immediately filled with questions. Tell me what? What was he supposed to tell me? Who had sent that message? Why did it sound so secretive? When Russell came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, I tried my best to act normal. I pretended that nothing had happened, but inside my mind was racing with thoughts and worries. I could not focus on anything else. Finally, the tension became too strong, and I could not keep quiet any longer. I looked directly at him and said, "Russell, I think it's time you tell me the truth." He immediately froze when he heard my words. For a few seconds, he did not say anything at all. His face suddenly looked pale, and his eyes were filled with fear. It was clear that he understood something had been discovered. Russell slowly asked, "Tell the truth, about what?" I answered calmly but firmly, "About the message." His eyes widened slightly. "You saw my phone?" he asked. I shook my head and said, "I only saw the notification. It said, 'Did you tell her yet?'" Russell looked both angry and worried at the same time. For a moment he stood there silently, then he walked over and sat down on the sofa. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I broke the silence. I said softly, "Russell, are you hiding something from me? You can tell me the truth." Russell sighed deeply and said, "Mona, it's not what you think. I crossed my arms and replied, then explain it. He looked down at the floor for a moment and then said something that made my heart start beating faster. Mona, he said slowly, I already made my choice. My chest tightened with fear and confusion. I immediately asked, what choice? Russell looked up at me and said, Mona, you remember when my company started having problems last month? I nodded. I clearly remembered that conversation. He had mentioned something about budget cuts and financial difficulties at work. Russell took a deep breath and continued, things got worse, much worse. Russell finally looked at me and said quietly, my department is closing. For a moment, I could not fully understand what he meant. The words felt heavy and confusing. I looked at him and asked slowly, closing? Russell nodded and took a deep breath before continuing. Yes, he said. I'm losing my job. For a second, it felt like the world had stopped around me. My mind struggled to accept what he had just said. I looked at him with disbelief and asked, you're serious? Russell nodded again and said softly, yes, I'm serious. Suddenly many things started to make sense, but one question was still bothering me. I said, but the message, the one that said, did you tell her yet? What was that about? Russell explained that the message had been sent by his manager. His manager knew that Russell was having a difficult time telling me the truth about the situation. Russell then continued to explain something even more surprising. He said that there was another position available in the company, but it was not in our city. It was located in another city far away. When I heard this, I repeated his words in shock. Another city. Russell nodded again and said, yes, it's far from here, and I already accepted the job. At that moment, I froze. My mind felt completely overwhelmed. Russell continued speaking and said, I know I should have talked to you first, Mona. I know I should have asked your opinion. But I was afraid that you would say no. For a few seconds, I could not say anything at all. My thoughts were racing in every direction. Russell was losing his job, and at the same time he had already accepted another one in a different city without discussing it with me. I looked at him carefully. He seemed nervous, almost like a child waiting to be scolded. It was clear that he expected me to become angry. And honestly, a part of me did feel angry. I wished he had trusted me enough to tell me earlier. But at the same time, another part of me began to understand something important. For weeks, Russell had been carrying this heavy problem completely alone. He had been dealing with the stress, the fear of losing his job, and the responsibility of protecting our future. In his mind, he believed that he had to solve everything by himself. Finally, I spoke. I said quietly, so that's why you've been acting so strange lately. Russell nodded and replied, yes. I didn't want to worry you. I looked at him and said gently but honestly, you should have told me. He lowered his head slightly and said, I know. For a moment, the room became silent again. The tension that had filled the air earlier was slowly fading. Then I asked the question that was still in my mind. When do we have to move? Russell looked at me with surprise. He clearly had not expected that question. You're not angry? He asked carefully. I gave a small smile and said, oh, I'm a little angry. But I also understand why you did it. The tension in his shoulders slowly disappeared, and he looked relieved. Then I said something that I felt was important for both of us to remember. We are a team, Russel. Next time we make decisions together. Russel nodded quickly and said, "Yes, together." He gently took my hand and kissed it, and for the first time in weeks I felt the honesty return between us. Life was about to change in many ways. Soon there would be a new city, a new job, and a completely new beginning for both of us. But this time, we were ready to face the future side by side. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to support the channel.